Excited to deliver this presentation for you. We're even more excited that we have registration of attendees globally. So we have attendees from the US, the Asia Pac, and also from Europe. So this is the first time RGP has held an event out of Europe, and we're leveraging our global team also. So we're very excited to deliver this presentation, and thank you for making the time to join us. My slides aren't moving forwards. Just give me 2 seconds. Kathy, do you know how I make my slides move down to the next page? Here we go. So my name's Andy Clark, everybody. I work for RGP. I'm going to be the host. I'm a principal consultant. I focus on business and finance transformation. I've been working in finance and accounting for over 25 years. And the last 15 years as a consultant working with clients to help them execute their global transformation programs. Now, just before I introduce, my amazing colleagues for today's presentation, I just want to give a quick overview of RGP for those that are not familiar. So RGP is a US-listed global firm who specialize in enabling clients successfully execute their transformation programs globally. We provide capability, capacity, and deep expertise across enabling functions, and we focus on program management, change management, technology implementations, process optimization, as well as risk and compliance. Now, given the importance of technology to transforming a finance operating model successfully, we wanted to jointly deliver this presentation with our execution partner, Blackline. We've been an execution partner of Blackline for over 15 years, and we've co-delivered over 500 projects. So I just want to ask Steve if you can give a brief introduction, and then we'll hand over to Tom.
Sounds great. Steve McKechnie, thank you so much for joining us today. I am part of RGP's Finance Transformation Leadership Team, and I am our Blackline Global Practice Leader.
Thank you, Steve. Tom, do you want to give a brief introduction?
Hi, everyone. Tom Curtris, Blackline Finance and Accounting Consultant. My background's now 11 years in the world of finance and accounting transformation. Started out in ERPs and now with financial close and other elements of the Office of the CFO products. As the picture might give it away, I also like my SateLink.
Excellent. Thanks, Tom. So look, welcome everybody, and we'll get into the content of today's session. So from an agenda perspective, what we wanted to cover today, we believe is topical globally with our clients. There are many challenges impacting finance leaders, whether it's the macroeconomic, the geopolitical instability, the emergence of digital technology, changing customer requirements, behaviors in the workplace. All these factors are resulting in finance leaders assessing and seeking new ways to optimize their finance operating model and gain that competitive advantage. So considering all these factors, for the agenda today, what we wanted to do is share some client insights that we think are relevant and we're seeing in the market today, how leading organizations are transforming their F&A operating model, and to make it more relevant and bring it to life, we also want to focus on the specifics around optimizing the financial close process. And Tom's going to cover, what are those enabling technologies that support that and enable that. So that's the key agenda today. So if I move into the client trends, so I guess what we're seeing is, I mentioned earlier around the unpredictable, the unstable nature, of the markets, of the economy, and those factors that are really impacting finance leadership. But what this is requiring finance to do is to provide business insights to the business more effectively, more efficiently, almost on a real-time basis. And this is so the business can ensure that it's making the optimal use of its capital and deploying resources efficiently. So that is requiring finance today to focus on deploying a digital strategy. That is a key trend we're seeing in the market that's enabling them through, whether it's automation or cloud ERP or focusing on data to ensure that they can provide that insight in the most efficient and effective way possible. Now, one of the things we are seeing in the market is a real focus on data. You know, is the data clean? Is it available? Is it consistently defined and understood amongst the business? So that has been a real focus that we've seen in leading organizations from an F&A perspective. And from a leadership perspective, I guess we're also seeing that the CFOs and in my experience, GBS leaders are becoming more responsible for the digital transformation to meet both the internal and the external requirements of stakeholders. So that's a real key trend we're seeing with clients at the moment. I guess the second one is more of an emerging risk. I think post-pandemic and changing behaviors within the workforce, combined with the economic and geopolitical instability, this is making accessing talent more challenging, retaining talent more challenging, but it's also driving up labour costs, which we're all seeing within our businesses and our territories today. So therefore, if you think about it from an operating model perspective, any assessment or decisions made around changing that operating model, the cost of doing that and the access to talent shouldn't be underestimated. That is proving to be a real challenge today. And the final trend we're seeing in the market is around the execution of strategic large-scale initiatives. So as we all know, most initiatives that are being executed today are on a global basis. Whether it's S/4HANA, Oracle, Workday, ServiceNow, any kind of end-to-end process optimization, there is a global aspect to those implementations. But what we're seeing in the market is the complexity around that and adapting those implementations for the varying local market requirements is becoming a real challenge. Whether it's compliance, culture, skills, time zones, they all need managing. And these global initiatives require really strong program and change management in order to execute them efficiently and effectively. And as I mentioned earlier, accessing that talent is proving a real challenge globally at the moment. You know, and finally, we would say this from an RGP perspective, but what we're also seeing in the market is a real appetite and a demand from clients for third parties or consultancies to bring new ideas, bring new insights, bring skills that are not available to enable the clients to deliver these transformation programs on a global basis and give access to those skills. So they're the three kind of trends we are seeing in the market in terms of impacting finance leadership and how they are optimizing their operating models to deliver value to the business. So what we wanted to do at this point in time is kind of complete our first polling question. So given the insights that we've given you from an RGP perspective, we'd love to hear from you as the audience, as in what is the top priority to enable your business strategy for the business that you work in? Is it around cost control and reduction? Is it around the timely business insight that we talked about earlier? Is it executing those strategic transformation initiatives to drive efficiency and optimization across the operating model? Or is it more meeting the risks and compliance requirements? And I guess kind of like my daughter keeps mentioning to me, right? It's kind of making sure we're being relevant and we understand what's the most important thing in the world today. So, you know, from an RGP perspective, we've explained what we're seeing, but we'd love to hear what you guys are seeing as well. So if you could click on your answer, we'll feedback what those are in a minute or two. And
so that there's no additional stress, there is no wrong answer.
Yeah, thanks for that, Steve. Obviously, no wrong answer. Yeah. We'd love to hear everybody's points of view. So these are the answers that are coming through. So it looks like we have got a consistent answer. So providing timely business insight is obviously one of the priority areas, and executing the transformation initiatives is also a priority area. And I guess, as you would understand, right, delivering those two is also consistent with the cost control and cost reduction. So that's amazing. Thank you, everybody, for completing that. We really appreciate it. Okay, so moving on into the next section. So what we wanted to do was to give an overview of what leading organizations are focusing on in terms of how they optimize their operating model. Now, before we get into the kind of detail, what we wanted to do is kind of provide, well, what do we mean by a finance operating model? So from an RGP perspective, we have a framework that we work with clients to help them assess, define, or even execute any kind of changes or transformation within their operating model. And it revolves around some of the classic components that most of us would recognize. So it's around end-to-end process, data and data governance. It's around the technology enablement, the digital and the automation enablement, but also the organizational readiness. And it's focusing on those components together that we find that leading organizations are able to optimize their finance operating models. Now, some of the more emerging components that we've added to this framework in the last couple of years is those in the middle. So there's obviously the operating model around meeting customer experience and customer requirements. So customer behaviors have been changing. Obviously, with digital transformation, we've seen a massive move in terms of that technology. But equally, the digital transformation technology has also influenced the behaviors of the workplace. So making people more efficient, the virtual working, adopting a global standard has also been impacting the finance operating model. And how do you optimize your operating model to meet those criteria and those requirements? So from an RGP perspective, when we talk about finance operating model, that is what we're referring to from a component perspective. Now, from an organizational perspective, there are obviously many operating models that exist within finance, from the decentralized structure through to the centralized structure. And there's obviously varying degrees between the two. I think we're all aware from a decentralized structure, it's all about autonomy and aligning the BU requirements to the customer's requirements. But what we do find is that provides a more agile model in terms of meeting customer requirements. But in the F&A space or in the enabling function space, it can provide challenges around lack of process consistency. Adopting global end-to-end processes proves to be a real challenge and therefore impacts efficiency. Whereas more of a centralized structure, you could argue that this agenda is more about driving efficiency. It's about implementing end-to-end global standard processes. And there's less of a connectivity to the business. And there's less of an agility from the F&A function to be able to respond to those requirements in the business. Now, they're the two extreme models that I think we've all seen within the business. Now, in terms of mitigating these risks and from a finance perspective, really focusing on driving end-to-end process standardization, a proven model has been the shared services GBS model that have been executed not only to organizationally reduce cost in terms of labor arbitrage, but also drive end-to-end process standardization. GBS organizations at the mature end of the scale, they tend to be very service orientated. They drive a service orientated culture. They measure the key KPIs that are not only important to kind of process and effectiveness, but also drive insight into the business. And finance organizations have been deploying the GBS model to drive that end-to-end process standardization, but also try and meet and tailor local requirements, but also drive efficiency as much as possible. Now, from a GBS perspective, the original strategy, 10, 15 years ago, all revolved around labor arbitrage. But what we're seeing with the digital transformation and the changing behaviors in the workplace and the workforce is that the traditional model of physical hub and spoke centers is becoming less of a strategy, and the move towards global virtual teams is where GBS organizations are heading, so that they can access the right talent at the right cost without that investment in physical centers. Now, from a process perspective, when we talk about driving end-to-end process standardization, finance have been through a journey of centralizing processes into a shared service center model. So obviously, I think, it's been a trend for a number of years that the traditional AP, collections, general accounting, AR, cash app, T&E, fixed asset accounting, they've been the primary areas where finance has been driving end-to-end process standardization and centralization. Now, if I draw your attention to the graph on the right, whilst centralization has been a key theme within finance and accounting for a number of years, there are still some process areas where there's a large gap between a standard peer and top performance. And we've highlighted those there. So top performing companies are able to centralize consolidation and external reporting much more successfully than a standard peer group. Now, that's a combination of technology and end-to-end process standardization that's enabled them to do that. The second area I wanted to draw your attention to is, F&A, finance and accounting, are now starting to move GBS up the value curve. They're looking to push as much scope into a GBS model as they can. So as you'll see with the three process areas at the bottom, tax, treasury, compliance, they're now the key opportunity areas for additional GBS scope. Even though top performing companies have managed to centralize some or large components of that process, the centralization of that scope is still pretty low. For example, 44% for compliance. But the gap between the standard peer group and the top quartile is where that's largest. So there's still plenty of opportunity for end-to-end process standardization and centralization from a process perspective. Now, one of the ways that we're seeing leading organizations being able to do this is how they manage and deploy those end-to-end processes. Now, within top performing companies, we're very keen at RGP to use independent benchmarks. So we work with APQC and we work with the Hacker Group on occasions. This independent data is demonstrating to us that the global process owner model is where top performers are deploying that governance most effectively and most consistently. And equally, from a percentage of shared services where we see end-to-end process in scope, so we're not talking, say, invoice to pay, we're talking purchase to pay. We're obviously seeing from the data that the purchase to pay is the highest of the end-to-end processes that are in scope for shared services. So as you think about your operating model, as you think about driving the optimization of the end-to-end process, having that GPO model in place and analyzing the scope that you have centralized within your shared services or GBS model is an area that you could potentially look to address. Now, if we look at it from a technology perspective, so this is also another kind of key area that we're seeing leading performance organizations drive the optimization of their operating model. It's really interesting to see that from a current adoption perspective, automation continues to be a big play, and the cloud-based ERP applications tend to be the most common methods. But from an automation perspective, you'll see in terms of projected growth that was anticipated this year, that was still where leading organizations were focusing. But if you look at the objective or realizing the business objectives in the graph on the right, I think everybody would agree when automation was initially a strategic priority for businesses, it did fall short of expectations for a while. That over the last couple of years has been addressed, and we are really seeing the confidence in automation really growing now within leading organizations. It's meeting expectations, it's delivering the benefits. And that's why we're seeing their met expectations or exceeding expectations growing from an automation perspective. I think in terms of some of the kind of emerging themes from a technology perspective, you will see that the business process management and the workflow tools, if you're talking about process mining or continuous improvement, that is becoming a key priority area for leading organizations. And that continued focus and growth in that area is expected to continue. But you'll see there from a BPM and a workflow tools perspective, they're absolutely smashing that out of the park in terms of meeting or exceeding the business expectations. And that's also the same for the cloud-based GBS service management application. So if we think of ServiceNow, we're seeing a lot of the global organizations implement that. It's meeting expectations. It's the technology to manage the customer service within a GBS organization most effectively. It's the highest performing in terms of meeting expectations, and it's got the lowest percentage in terms of falling short of expectations. But this demonstrates within the market that optimizing the finance operating model, this is a real focus area for organizations, particularly around automation and ERP. So just moving on now to the next section in terms of how are leading organizations, what are they focusing on in terms of transforming their operating models from a finance perspective? So as you would expect, right, it's been a trend over the last couple of years that the F&A organization is leveraging the advancement in digital technology and the technology that's available to support the end-to-end process transformation to really target reducing that manual, repetitive activity to drive process optimization and efficiency. So that percentage of time within an F&A organization is significantly expected to reduce. Now, equally, from an F&A perspective, leveraging the emergence of the digital technology and the focus on the customer requirements, whether that's self-service reporting or maintaining some of the organizational master data in a self-service way, leveraging that technology is where the focus is really at within the F&A community. So data mining, data analytics, predictive analytics, providing that business insight in the future as opposed to reporting the results of the past is where we're seeing the percentage of time in total and energy of an F&A organization to significantly increase and be the priority area for an F&A organization. And we'd be really keen to hear at the end if that is resonating with you and your transformation programs and where your focus is from a business perspective. I think this is really true in terms of providing the business with that insight. I guess in terms of how are finance and accounting tackling this, right? So what we're seeing within leading organizations, there's a real focus to move up that maturity curve of moving away from the manual processes through to fully optimized end-to-end automated processes, deploying, not only the technology aspects, but the process design aspects, but meeting the expectations of customers and the workplace. So there's a real focus on driving process and workflow changes. There's an appetite there to be more agile from a finance and accounting perspective. We're seeing the investment in cloud and the focus on data. Getting that single version of the truth for data is a real key driver to enabling the success of those cloud investments and providing that business insight. As I mentioned earlier, there's the investment in predictive analytics and digital automation so that the F&A community is becoming quicker, it's becoming leaner. And there's a real overarching theme here of finance and accounting as an organization in the future doing more or the same in terms of delivering an output with the same or less resources. That is the real challenge that we're seeing in the F&A community right now. And I think, sometimes is a bit of a blind spot with many F&A clients that we work with is considering those changing workforce demographics that I mentioned earlier. Accessing talent and retaining talent is a real challenge in the market, and accessing talent that is aligned to the future state of the finance operating model from a strategic workforce planning perspective is a real priority. Investing in the technology is great, but if you haven't got the skills and capabilities to optimize it, then obviously you won't see the return on investment. So there is that investment in process improvement, the technology, but also attracting and retaining that top talent. So, I've talked about a lot of the themes and the impacts from an operating model perspective, but as I mentioned earlier, we do use the independent benchmarks to to really inform how we're working with clients and how we're seeing the different trends in the markets. And as you can see from this slide, there are clear benefits within leading organizations of optimizing finance end-to-end processes and implementing those enabling technologies. Obviously, procure to pay, that's where you see the biggest gap at the moment between a standard peer group and top performance. But I think across the board within core finance processes, there is a big gap between the standard peer group and top performance. And the investment in the end-to-end process optimization and enabling technologies is where the top performing F&A organizations are focusing. I think dropping into that next level of detail, if you look at R2R or finance and accounting from an end-to-end process perspective, there are some metrics in here we also wanted to provide, and we will provide the presentation after the session, is where you're seeing major benefits between standard peer and top performing companies from an efficiency and an effectiveness and a productivity perspective. So as an example, percentage of automated account reconciliations, there's a clear gap there between standard and moving to top performance. Equally, you will find the days to complete a consolidated financial statement is over 30% shorter, where companies are focused on those end-to-end processes and enabling technologies. And I think just finally within this section, the one key message that we wanted to communicate, to you as an audience is when assessing and analyzing and designing and executing target operating model initiatives globally, ensuring that you do that across all components of the operating model is critical. They are all interdependent. You can't focus on organization without focusing on the end-to-end process, the data, the governance, and the digital technology that enables that. But an overarching message is, from a process standardization, that tends to be deployed first. Automation without standardization, what we are seeing in the market, is very costly to implement and is very rarely not sustainable. But it's the top performing organizations that are tackling that are seeing or exceeding the expectations of implementing those initiatives the most. So on that basis, we've got the second polling question. So given the insight and the overview that I've given in the last kind of 15, 20 minutes, the second polling question we had is, from what aspect of the finance operating model is your highest priority to transform? Apologies. So is it standardizing, streamlining processes? Is it talent that's the biggest priority? Is it automation? Or is it the technology to provide that insight into business performance? What are you seeing as kind of the highest priority within your organization? We'd love to see that answer. So I'll pause there whilst everybody.
And I think on this one, you can pick more than one. But again, there's no wrong answer.
I'm really interested to see how automation comes out here.
Yeah.
Ah, there we go. So it is a combination of standardizing and streamlining processes and automating those repetitive tasks. So that's obviously the clearest priority. I guess the one I'm really surprised about is the talent one, is the attracting and retaining finance talent. I was expecting that to be a real priority as well. So that is something for us to reflect on. So look, I really appreciate everybody completing those polls. So we're now going to move on to the next section, if I can get the screen to work. I'm going to hand over to Steve to talk in more detail about financial close optimization. Over to you, Steve.
Thank you, Andy. And as you can tell, I'm from the far western portion of the UK, formerly known as the colonies. But thank you all for being here. Very quickly on the financial close optimization, holistic approach is the key part. And as Andy shared with some of the things that he had discussed, it's not just any one thing. But one thing that does tie this all together are the people. And change isn't easy. We know that. And that's why we take the more holistic approach. Many cases, the fear of change exceeds the current pain that people are feeling. And with that, that's where the communication is very, very key and critical. It also could be a bandwidth or capacity issue where folks are, I can't take on anymore. I don't have time to invest time to get a return on my time. So with that, we're, again, taking that more holistic approach with data, workflow management, cloud platforms, process optimization, all of this is surrounded by people and support of people. Next slide, please. Thank you. And with that, there are a lot of benefits as we talk about a cloud-based solution. So we're going to focus on a cloud-based solution here. Cloud-based should not be scary. Everything is going to the cloud. And as Andy said earlier, ERPs are all going there. In fact, Oracle, SAP, and others have said that they are going to stop support of their on-prem solutions in the next few years. So with that, what are some of the things that you can get out of it? Well, you configure the solution, not customize. Helps really drive that standardization. Gives you a lot more visibility, real time. And as part of the, just more and more benefits being from, a cloud-based solution. Reduce the paper, expedite the close, and we'll come back to some metrics on that shortly. Yes, we have some more of those. But a couple of things that are really, really important. Reduce the manual, the administrative burden that folks are put under. I mean, spreadsheets were great when they came out. That's been 25, 30 years ago. Requirements have increased, regulations have increased, reporting needs have increased, and all of this is building more and more of that administrative manual effort, taking away from what folks are hired to do, the analytical work. And believe it or not, all of this actually improves employee satisfaction. And so with that may be where many of you have already adopted or started getting into cloud-based solutions where your folks are already happy and employee retention may not be as important or not as high a priority. Based on what we have seen, and I will share very briefly, I was on a university campus last year speaking with employers, speaking with companies, and many of them are having a hard time hiring the top talent and then keeping them. And with talking with them, a lot of them were sharing that about 80% of the time for their new hires was spent in spreadsheets. And so this was a real strong tie to why they were having difficulty hiring and retaining talent. Tech graduates are very, very tech savvy. They are more than happy to let the systems do the administrative work. I mean, look at their, they can show you all the things they can do on their phone. They want systems to be able to do that as well so that they can spend their time doing the analytical work and what you hired them to do. So can we go to the next slide, please? All right. And again, like Andy said, we'll provide a copy of this presentation later, and you can look at these. I'm going to zip through these metrics very, very quickly. But as you can see, top performers, median, and others, how many days it just takes to close. It's 15 days to do your annual close, 2 to 3 weeks. There are some it's taking them a couple of months. And so for many companies, they see that coming on the horizon with their financial and calendar close matching up. Next slide, please. All right. And I do want to caveat this. These are dollars, but these ratios are applicable, whether you're talking euros, pounds, Swiss francs, whatever the currency is, these ratios still apply. So if we can go to the next one, please. This one I do want to hover on a little bit. And this, again, we're utilizing Hackett and other independent companies with their metrics. They're not Blackline partners, so they have nothing to gain or lose by sharing this information. But the fact of 50% faster to close and getting a 2.77 return on every one that you spend. So €1 provides a €2.77 return. The part on the right, I do a couple of things. One, we have definitely seen lower audit fees as our clients move into cloud solutions. In fact, it's become fewer and fewer incidences now. Every so often, we have an old school audit partner who realizes the audit fees are being lowered, and they actually fight against cloud solutions. We can help overcome that. I also think the 9% improvement in accuracy is low. If we don't know what the baseline was, then we really don't have a baseline with which to start and improve the metrics, improve the accuracy. I actually think that 9% is much higher, but there's so much of the baseline nobody knows right now. Next slide, please. All right, now this is an actual case study, and I'll go through it pretty quickly. And again, this will be provided later. This is a UK-based global pharmaceutical. And so we work with the client, the sponsor, a very successful project. We have some metrics coming up. But what did you think made it successful? I'd like to get these recorded. So these are literally what the client provided us to put into this presentation. Excite your people. Change is refreshing. Let them own it. So make the people a part of the solution. Don't just force it on them, but also help them understand you're going to be able to overcome a lot of the things that are painful now. Change is not a bad thing. And with the process, get the team engaged to redesign the process. Don't assume, okay, we're just going to do what the system wants. No, take the opportunity to redesign some of your processes. Why does it take us 7 steps to do this when we really only need 2? Leverage experience and expertise. This was a very nice call out that he provided for us, RGP, for what we were able to bring to him. And then I really liked his term about technology. Lean into the system. Unlock the efficiencies. Really like that. So we did lean into it. Next slide, please. And so very, very quickly, and again, we'll share this, utilize a roadmap, have assigned roles and responsibilities, leverage expertise. I mean, all of these things, no matter whether it's a large system implementation, a medium, a small one, these are some of the things that one should always do. This ties back to our first polling question. These are things that we did with this client. We implemented account reconciliations, task management, and compliance. And with all of that, we did it in a phased approach. We also made sure that we followed these things to make sure that they were successful. So what does success look like? Next slide, please. They were doing 350 monthly general ledger account reconciliations, all of them manual, all of them in spreadsheets. Chaos was not a theory. They lived it every monthly, every quarterly, every annual close. Within the first month of going live, they were able to have Blackline certify 60% of their reconciliations based on the rules, tolerances, frequencies, risk levels, things like that. 15% were identified as low risk. So we worked with a client. We said, well, then why are you reconciling them monthly? Let's make them quarterly. And so we're able to get these low risk accounts, actually be able to provide greater focus on the medium and high risk accounts without a lot of time being sucked into the low risk account reconciliations. They were able to reduce their close process hours by 20%. 20%. And with that, able to spend more of their time doing the analytical work. One of the other things that they really, really appreciated, 100% real-time visibility and oversight. They knew at any given moment of the close where they were. So that was one of their huge things. So increased standardization, increased time to perform analytical work, and increased and auditable controls. So these were all benefits. There are others. If you have questions, we can share those as well. So next slide, please. Excellent. This is our next polling question. This is the third one. So what obstacles do you face in executing large-scale transformation efforts? Cost overruns, project management, lack of subject matter expertise, lack of experience in transformations, which is separate from subject matter expertise, or inability to adopt new processes or systems, a change management challenge. For this poll, you can select one. This is not multiple selection. You do have to pick one. And again, there's no wrong answers. And I'm sure all of us have experienced these at different times. Okay. Wow. Statistically, a very even split, but cost overruns and project management is leading the way. No, this is interesting. Personally, was not expecting to have a spread like this, so thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to hand off to Tom now, who is with Blackline, and will bring us to the conclusion, and then with Andy to wrap up.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Steve, Andy, for a great presentation thus far. Wanted to give a picture of Blackline as an enabling capability to the Office of Finance. As we've seen in the early part of this presentation, the impetus to change, particularly in the areas of R2R, is huge opportunity for a large number of organizations, particularly with that shift from the labor arbitrage model into sort of more virtual global teams. Next slide, Andy. And just to sort of précis that, wanted to share some insights from Hackett. I find this particular insight very relevant. They looked at 2023, which has been a very interesting year economically for a number of reasons. And they've identified a number of what they term digital world-class finance companies and looked at the performance against a number of metrics this year. And I would highly encourage everyone to look at this study. It's particularly interesting. But what we've seen in a largely inflationary year, that these companies have actually been able to reduce the operating cost associated with finance. And you can see from those other statistics that doing more with less is a common theme. We're shifting away from the manual and repetitive and really embracing finance away from that notion of a cost center and really to a value center and a value creator through areas of automation and the shift in the work. And I wanted to relate some of our customer examples down the bottom there, looking at impacts that have been achieved from reduction to close, particularly this notion of close-related overtime. I think for those of us in finance and accounting, the notion of a standard 40-hour week is something that particularly at month end goes completely out the window. Looking at areas of automation that have been achieved at a reconciling level or during the close, and particularly those quality metrics as well being able to be measured. Tools like Blackline put an insight into traditionally Excel-based processes where you just lose that visibility, and we'll see that in shortly. So next slide, please. So I'd like to empower everyone to think about the organizational but also the personal impact of manual process. We believe that there really are two results of manual processes. Either you can get through everything but you don't have any time for anything else, or that you're not able to achieve all the work that you'd intend to because of the manual nature of the process, and that increases risk substantially. And traditionally, accounting and particularly the close has been quite linear, and particularly where, if we think about after the general ledger has been locked and transactional processes, that drop off into Excel has forced us to be linear in our process. And at Blackline, we really challenged that. Steve mentioned some of the impacts that RGP have seen with our mutual clients, but really it's about automating the manual and the repetitive, still maintaining that risk management and being able to shift that impact and time into the value add. Next slide, please. And that impact is going to be felt at a number of different levels. And again, from using Blackline, you're using it as a very strategic capability to reduce the SG&A as a percentage of revenue, potentially looking at cost optimization, that visible finance. There's a real push for finance to be business partners, to become more visible in other areas of the business. And that really aligns to those strategic goals. But when you put the platform in, you've got those direct benefits at a local and a global level. So at that local level, changing that value of work at the coalface, developing your team, shifting to a managed by exception approach, and at that global level, getting a lot of the standardization or the ability to standardize that process in ways that you haven't been able to before. Next slide, please. Whilst we're focusing today on the benefits of optimizing the financial close, the vision of Blackline as a NASDAQ listed company is to really continue to inspire, power and guide digital transformation in the office of the CFO. Blackline is, as a vendor, offering a number of different capabilities in this area, and from a single vendor relationship can support you in a number of different initiatives, all with a view of automating the manual and the repetitive nature of certain processes in finance to really shift to a value-added approach, above which, following a unified data model, workflow automation, and unified user experience across this. And we are, as a particular company, global footprint, significant customer base, and with a significant user community. Next slide. And my final slide, we want to bring that to life just a little bit. And again, hack it from their wisdom there with a quote: if you can't see it, you can't measure it. And if you don't measure it, you cannot properly assess it. And I think this is no more relevant to financial close. I'm sure we've all been in those processes where recs are in Excel, the close checklist and task tracking is in a Google Sheet. It really drops off into an area that is very difficult to get visibility. What you're seeing on the screen here is, a dashboard of a global group controller, and looking at elements of the close across a whole host of different dimensions, traditional areas of where are we, at in terms of an entity-based close, where are we at in terms of the task completion, top right, and then in that middle line, imploring you to look at the sort of left-hand side again. What is the output of the process? What are the bottlenecks in the process? Well, we've identified here a number of required adjustments that have come out of the reconciliation process. What is the materiality of those adjustments and where does it sit? So I'm getting a much better picture of my close, more holistic. And this is going to enable us to shift to a more continuous close and challenge that linearity. After today, I would implore you to engage RGP, the long-standing partners of Blackline, to potentially evaluate the potential and options for you in your business models. I'll pass back to Andy now.
Thanks, Tom. Really appreciate that, and I couldn't agree more in terms of if you can't see it, you can't measure it. If you can't measure it, you can't improve it. Which is obviously, a great statement and a great message for everybody, on a journey to optimize their operating model. But I think that aligns to some of the key themes we've talked about in this session. So, one of the key messages we wanted to kind of end the session on is, in terms of optimizing the finance operating model, you can't look at one component individually. You have to look at the operating model, whether it's a diagnostic, it's a design phase, or it's an execution phase. You have to do it across all components. Now, you will do it to varying degrees, but in terms of that theme that Tom has just talked about, in terms of seeing it and measuring it, it has to be the end-to-end process. The data has to be, it has to be clean, it has to be accurate, it needs to be available, it needs to be consistently understood. The technology needs to be there in order to visualize that technology, that process analysis in an end-to-end way that is meaningful. So the kind of first message is, look, if you're going on that finance optimization journey, or you're kind of reassessing where you are in terms of your own journey, please, consider that holistic view in terms of a finance operating model. The second message is, the evidence is there. If you focus on the optimization of the finance operating model, and what we're seeing in the market at the minute, the key components or the priority components are around process data and the technology. that is evidenced in the benchmarks of where the top performing companies are focusing. And you can see that in terms of the independent benchmarks that we're presenting, and that is delivering that top performance. So I guess in that vein, we're going to kind of end the session there. I really wanted to thank everybody for attending. The attendance has been great. I appreciate it's really early for some people. It's really late in the day for others. So really thank you for making the session. We appreciate it. Hope you have a good rest of the day. I'll just finally confirm that obviously we will look to issue the material from today's presentation in the next 24 to 48 hours. And we will also respond to any questions that have been submitted to us. My preference is not to try and rush those and not do them justice. I'd rather we kind of consider those answers and present them in a meaningful way.
Do we have a fourth polling question?
Sorry, Steve?
Do we have a fourth polling question?
Yeah, we do. Thank you for the reminder. So just for a bit of fun, right? I know we're all used to the virtual working and the Teams and the Zoom technology and running these kind of sessions. So we're really keen to hear, right? What's your most annoying or unattractive Zoom Teams? What's your most unattractive habit? Is it your appearance 1 minute before the meeting starts? Is it, like we encounter quite often in our office, right? Is somebody talking so loud, or do you talk so loud it annoys everybody in the house or the office? Do you tend to dress professionally on top, casual on bottom, or are you one of those people that always forgets you're on mute? And I guess some of the experience we've had as a team as well, we are meticulously focused on the presentation and the visual settings when we're presenting in Zoom from a corporation perspective, but all equally as annoying. There's only one answer, so we'd love to hear what everybody's perspectives is, just to wrap up the session.
You just had to put that third one in for me, didn't you, Andy? You did it? Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Everybody always gets to be on mute, which is particularly annoying, right? Yeah, and I guess appearance is important, right? I guess we all, as human beings, we always focus on. Excellent. So, Tom, Steve, if there's nothing else from yourselves, I'll wrap up the session. And again, look, thank everybody for joining today, and hope you have a good day. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll end the session then.